Good evening and welcome to Talking Teeth Thursday. And this evening we're talking about holes in your teeth. Cavities, dental caries, tooth decay, and that will include other things that you may have heard of, things like early childhood caries, root caries, bottle caries, or caries, as some of my Scottish colleagues would refer to it as. Anyway, if this is the first time you've joined me on a Thursday evening, you will find me loitering in this space around this time, talking about some aspect of oral health. And the whole purpose is to help you actually help yourself have a healthier smile for life. And there's a reason why we say healthier rather than healthy smile for life, because it's always there's no guarantees in this life, and it's always about being the best that you possibly can at this point of in your life, because like everything else in life, the only thing we're assured of is change. So this evening we is talking about holes in your teeth, and if you do not follow us, please follow us on social media, like, share, do all those things that you're meant to do with social media. I always forget to ask people to do. But anyway, let me just share my screen now. You will notice I am back using Zoom. So I'm hoping this is going to work, because me and Zoom have had a bit of a love-hate relationship this last lot of months. But I think we are back on track. And I think hopefully the tech will not let me down. So let me just share the screen, and I will get to what we want to talk about. So I am hoping that we have got things the way I want them to appear. The minute I think I've got a totally blank screen, I am hoping that you are seeing, yes, I think you may be seeing what I want you to see, which is this slide that says all the sort of options that you can describe tooth decay as. So, if you're talking to a professional, they'll talk about dental caries. And I always remember having a Scottish tutor many, many years ago who always talked about dental caries. And she had the most gorgeous Scottish accent. And I mean, it was, students being students, she used to always find it quite amusing in their own warped way that it was caries as opposed to caries. But what we're talking about is one of the most common diseases of mankind. And we know what causes it, we know how to prevent it, and yet we still have roughly 50% of the population suffering from it. Now, if that was any other disease, there would be the greatest clamour right from politicians down to lay people and everybody in between. But because we can treat it, and it's sort of almost invisible because you can't see it. It's not a big mark on the outside of your face. It doesn't distort the shape of your arm, but it has a huge negative impact on individuals and their families and their education and all aspects of their life. And considering it is by and large a preventable disease, I think, we really need to get our act together on this. So, I'm gonna ramble a little, hopefully not too much, but it is one of the most common non-communicable diseases in the world. And as I say, it is by and large preventable. The thing about it is, you need to know what your risk is of developing tooth decay, cavities, caries, whatever you want to call it, holes in your teeth, rotten teeth, any of the above, all of the above. You need to understand what your risk factors are, and you need to then work out what you need to do to counteract those risk factors and actually maintain that balance to have a healthy smile for life. And I'm going to give you an example. Somebody mid-50s, 60s, who hasn't had a filling in 40 years, and all of a sudden they need a number of fillings. And they go and they have all this treatment, and then they say, oh, I saw a dentist and it was a new dentist and they found all these holes in my teeth, but I haven't had a problem. Now, that is a breakdown of communication, because the first thing that you want to know is, why do I have all these cavities now? Because if you've been fine for the last 20 or 30 years, or even last year, last couple of years, you want to know what has changed. And those of you who know Growing Smiles know we're all about solutions. So first thing we want to know is why your mouth is in the state it is in at this point in time, and what has got it to be there. So you need to identify what your risks are. So, as we get older, a lot of things just don't work as well as they used to. Also, we tend to have more chronic illnesses. So type 2 diabetes is incredibly common. Some of the most common medications to treat that have a side effect of dry mouth. So all of a sudden your saliva flow has changed, the quality, possibly the quantity, and that secret helper in your mouth is not doing its job because it's not able to. And unless you understand that, you can't manage the dry mouth to help prevent that risk. The worst thing I always say about anybody that gets a filling or any sort of dental treatment is if you don't understand why, because if you don't understand why, it's not in your hands. You're not given the tools, you're not given the support to actually make the changes to prevent it happening again. And there really is nothing more depressing for a dental professional than sort of saying the same thing every 6 months, every year. Here we go, we've got more of the same. And if you've got fillings, the points of weaknesses are the margins where the filling and the tooth actually join. So, you get secondary decay developing around that. Somebody who has recession, the root surfaces have become exposed. The root surfaces are much softer than the enamel of the crown, which is the hardest substance in the body, and it will decay more rapidly. So unless you understand that you need to sort of really up your game as far as maybe your oral hygiene goes, you're making sure your teeth are getting enough fluoride and other remineralizing products around them, you do not have the tools to do anything to change. So, something, it's just going to come back to bite you again and again and again. And the thing about as we get older, a bit like the very young, our mouths are more difficult to work in. And cooperation, particularly people who have maybe dementia, particularly the old elderly, even physically getting them in and out of a dental chair, getting them to a dentist, can be a real challenge. So prevention is by far the better part of the cure. Believe me, we definitely want to avoid that. Otherwise, you are going to be in this situation that, this is your vision. So this is the mouth looking out at dental operators, clinicians, fixing teeth basically. And if you've got a mouth full of fillings, which many of us have, particularly of a certain generation, you will find that it's round the margins of those fillings, those crowns, all those things that actually can go wrong, potentially will go wrong. Even our ability, our muscles that don't work as well. We talk about aches and pains and, oh, nothing works as well. I'm not as flexible as I used to be, can't touch my toes. The muscles in your mouth don't work as well either. And that impacts your self-cleansing mechanism. So your ability to go and clear foodstuffs from your mouth. And that, with a dry mouth, can really up your risk of developing new cavities. So, we see it, it's not just a childhood disease, although sadly and tragically, we are seeing more children admitted to hospital for general anaesthetic, which has a life-threatening risk with it, for general anaesthetics for tooth extraction. And in some cases, you are talking all 20 baby teeth being extracted. So that's a full clearance of children who are under 5, under preschool age. And, 5, 9-year-olds is the most common reason for them being admitted to hospital. That's quite horrific in this day and age. We're not living in the third world. But what we have done is we've evolved with what we eat, how and when we eat. When I was a child, you sat down, you ate at meal times, and you didn't go looking for food until the next mealtime. You ate as family. You wouldn't have dared go into the fridge or into the cupboard and take something without being directed to or asking permission. So our lifestyle has changed. Busy parents, busy children, often eating on the run, trying to fit meals in and around really hectic schedules, sometimes it's not the parents who are feeding the children. And that's why some of the school policies and childcare policies for healthy snacks and all that have really had an impact. We've had the sugar levy, which has reduced the amount of sugar in fizzy drinks and juices, which again has had an impact. People are still buying them, but because manufacturers have reduced the amount of sugar, you know, there's some benefits there. So to reduce tooth decay overall, we've got a lot of things, a lot of plates spinning that actually will see us benefit. Likewise, you know, our teeth being exposed to fluoride toothpaste, you know, I mean, I was talking about this a couple of weeks ago. It's probably got the single most benefit of everything in the last 50 years. You know, when I was a child, fluoride wasn't in toothpaste. And I remember as fluoride was added to toothpaste, you know, you had to go looking for fluoride toothpaste. Now you actually have to go looking for a fluoride-free toothpaste. And, you know, it's back again of balancing your risk because, you know, there are things now of calcium hydroxyapatite toothpaste, you know, for those people who, for whatever reason, don't want to use fluoride. And that's fine because, again, dependent on your risk, you know, do you need that extra help? So anyway, let's ramble on a little and mumble on a little bit further in my little way. So what we're talking about are those things that cause holes. This is a model, as you can see, and you can see cavities start on the biting surface. They can start in between. They can start down here, although there's not on that particular model. But no matter what, you need certain things to be present. So what you do is you need to put sugar or starch, something that's going to break down your mouth with the bacteria. So plaque bacteria, the stuff that lives in the sticky stuff that gathers in your teeth. So the plaque bacteria get hold of the sugars. I'm keeping it really simple this evening. Get hold of the sugars, and basically they poop acid. Okay, easiest way of thinking of it. Now that acid gets around your teeth and it starts to melt the tooth surfaces. Now that acid needs to be at a level of 5.5, which is quite low, to actually start to dissolve or melt enamel, which is the hardest substance in your body. Now, if you have recession, you have denting, the second layer, much softer layer of the tooth exposed at the neck of the teeth, that acid doesn't need to be as strong to start to break down and demineralize that root surface. And we need to get about 6.4. Okay, so if you think of 7 is neutral, 6.4 is where dentin is going to start to dissolve, 5.5 is where enamel is going to start to dissolve. And that needs to stay around the tooth surface for long enough to actually break down those minerals and actually start to develop demineralization, start to develop a cavity. Now, when you've finished the sugars in your mouth, when you've finished eating or drinking, and I don't mean each one, when you finish so if you're having a packet of sweets, when you finish the whole lot, what happens is your saliva comes along like the cavalry, and your saliva comes flowing around your teeth, and it helps to clear bits away from your teeth, but it also helps to buffer and neutralize those acids that have been produced. So the calcium phosphate that's in your saliva helps to buffer, it helps to neutralize, it helps to clear, and it helps your ability to clear stuff from your teeth. And that is that remineralizing process. So what you've got is an acid attack and demineralization, and then your saliva comes along and remineralizes. And what you're wanting to do is a nice even balance between, you know, yes, we eat, the chances are there's going to be some starch, carbohydrate, sugars in any sort of food or drink pretty much. And what happens then, you've got to give it enough time then for the saliva to remineralize. So when you put something in your mouth that is sugary, if there's plaque bacteria there, it will drop pretty much instantaneous. The pH will drop like a lead balloon. And it will take a long, slow time, depending on the quality and quantity of your saliva, for your tooth surface to recover and be remineralized. It can be anywhere between 20 minutes and 2 hours. So if you need it meal times, you know, you're probably going to be okay if you've got saliva that's going to work for you. If, on the other hand, you are grazing, your mouth is never going to recover enough between those sugary acid attacks to actually prevent a cavity forming. So I always say eat well. Eat at meal times only. that is the simplest way of trying to manage, your risk of tooth decay, is try and eating at meal times only and avoid eating the hour before bedtime. And I'm sort of been quite brutal about that because, if you want to go by the book, it's, avoid sugary things. Keep sugary things to meal times only and avoid sugary things the hour before bed, that golden hour before bed. Because when we go to sleep at night, our saliva pretty much dries up and you've got nothing there to help you out. So that's where the problem lies. So, if you've not given your saliva time to work for you before you go to bed, and your plaque control, so in other words, your oral hygiene is not A1, A+++, the chances are there'll be some bacteria lying around there at night, and if you've left some sugar lying around, you're basically giving them a free hand to do their business. So that's what we're talking about. So it's not inevitable. I mean, if you know any dental professionals, it is the unusual child of a dental professional that has cavities. Why is that? Because they know and they help and try and control the sugar intake. And the same is it's not easy. So these are the things that I was talking about there. So what you need to have bacteria. You need to have the bacteria in the plaque. So bacterial plaque gathers around the gum margins, in between your teeth, on the biting surfaces, all the crinkly bits that basically are difficult to get in and around. And what you need to do is break down that plaque biofilm before it's mature enough to cause you problems, because the bacteria that live in your mouth go and live in that plaque biofilm. So if your oral hygiene is perfect, your risk of decay is much lower. Sugars then, oh gosh, they're nearly in everything. And I talked about sugar a few weeks ago on Talking to Thursday. Go onto the website, have a look. Sugar is pretty much, I wouldn't say quite everywhere, but we are eating way too much sugar, way more than the recommended amount. And, you need to start looking at food labels. And food labels are difficult enough to read. And again, there's information on the website about how to read a food label as to what's low sugar and what's high sugar. And it can be quite surprising. And just because it says free from added sugars does not mean it's sugar-free. So juices, and we're quite big in the UK on diluting juices. If it's made from fruit concentrate, the WHO, the World Health Organization, classifies fruit concentrates as a free sugar, and it's the free sugars that you want to reduce. So if you're using diluting juice, you really want it to be a hint of juice. So you're talking 1 part juice, 10 parts water. Okay, so it's really, really limited. And you're working your way down to actually getting onto water. And many more kids now are much better at drinking water than to my generation were. So it's sort of an evolution about drinking that. But you need the bacteria in the plaque. You need sugar. And of course, you need teeth. If you had no teeth, you weren't going to get any problems. So, that's one way of doing it. But there's other things that can go on if you don't have teeth. But, you need tooth surfaces, and explained a wee bit about, the difference between decay on enamel and decay on root surfaces. And all these three need to be together over time. They need to be there long enough and frequently enough to give you problems. And I say you can early signs of decay. It's one of the reasons it's so important to see your dental team, is they will pick up those early signs of decay. And because it can be remineralized, you can heal early decay, but by and large, you'll not recognize it. You need a professional saying, you've got a bit of a white spot there, that can be repaired, but you need to work, you need to do X, Y, and Z for it. So I say there are ways and means, but your dental professional can help you. So what can you do to prevent it? Well, you can take any one of the three out of the way. Time is always going to be with us. So it's then how do you actually reduce some of the other ones? Okay, no teeth, not a problem. Easy peasy, just extract all your teeth. Oh, let's not go there. Because that did happen at a time. I remember people telling me that their parents had all their teeth extracted, in their 20s, and that was their their 21st birthday gift was false teeth. The other thing you could do is remove the bacterial plaque. And that's reasonable enough expectation. And there is a guy who follows us on Twitter who is a dentist in the US and regularly reminds how brilliant his team are at their oral hygiene, but they have their sugary sweet things. And believe me, if you went into a dental practice and saw what they're eating in the kitchen, you actually might be quite shocked that their oral hygiene is brilliant. Okay, so if you can control that plaque biofilm, and you're not just talking 2 minutes twice a day, you're talking that interdental cleaning thoroughly every day. You're talking, you know, really, really effective every surface, all teeth, last thing at night and in the morning, to remove all that bacterial plaque biofilm that is actually going to be a big risk factor there. So you could do that, and that'll certainly help. But your average child is not going to be able to do that. Your children rely on parents brushing their teeth until they're, you know, the rule of thumb is sort of until they can tie their shoelaces, 7, 8, 9. I tend to say it's very individualized because we are all different. I mean, I know teenagers that are not great at their toothbrushing. And you know, I have known me to stand on the side of the bath in our house and actually still be brushing pretty mature teenagers' teeth to make sure they were done thoroughly. So I say, yeah, you can cut out that bacterial plaque. You can remove the sugar from the diet, and that is something that's not only going to benefit your teeth, it's going to benefit your overall health and well-being, because we just do eat too many sugars. It's the reason we've got so many type 2 diabetics, and then that increases our risk of a whole lot of heart of other things. Obesity and being overweight is not good for us. So being healthy and keeping well, reducing sugars really helps in that. You need to understand where your sugars are and when you're having them. And again, I say this often enough that, you know, we talk about a treat. A treat is not something you have once a day. A treat has become sort of quite a common thing. Whereas a treat sort of tend to be once a week. But those sugary treats are now sort of sneaking in almost on a daily basis. And those treats where we would recommend, if you're going to have something sugary, have it at a mealtime, you know, tends to be in between meals. So, you know, that's something you might want to look at. So, you know, if you have that sort of sweet tooth thing, you might want to look at what can you swap sugar for. So if you're adding sugar to tea and coffee, you can change it to something like erythritol here or xylitol. You can buy it in powder form, and it's just spoon by spoon. And if you're not sure where to find it, look in the supermarket where you buy your sugar, look at the top shelf. That is where the sugar sweeteners, the alternatives are up there. And if you're not sure, look on the website, contact us. We're ultimately here to help. So that's the other thing, cut down the sugar. And actually, all of us should cut down the amount of sugar we eat every day. And this is a great website. That's a QR code that will take you to Save Kids from Sugar. And there's a lot of really useful information there about how much sugar, where sugars are, particularly in things like cereals. So I know a lot of kids that, you know, are hungry coming up to bedtime. And parents will say, oh, just have a bowl of cereal, you know, and even your cornflakes, you would be surprised how much sugar is in your average box of cornflakes. So I say you need to look at that, you know, it's like putting the jam on the toast. Now, this is homemade blackberry jam, good old McGee blackberries. I make it every year, and I know how much sugar's in that because I put it in there, and that is a treat. You know, honey, it's a sugar, it may be a natural sugar, but it's still a free sugar, and it is still going to cause decay. So what can you change? What can you look as an alternative? Can you have your cake and eat it, so to speak? Can you actually save those sugary things to have them at meal times only? So if you are going to have that juice, have it at a meal time only. Certainly avoid it that hour before bedtime. So there's ways and means of sort of modifying little minor changes. It's not, you know, you don't want to change everything. And it is all about getting that balance between the sugar attack, that demineralization, and that recovery phase of remineralization. And that's what takes time. You know, so how much sugar are you eating and drinking? Don't forget the drinks, because they sneak in there and you don't necessarily think it. You know, think about tomato ketchup. Yeah, there's a reason why kids love tomato ketchup, because it's sweet. So look at sauces and condiments and things that you add. Basically anything that goes into your mouth. Medication, supplements, it might be sports supplements. Again, how often are you putting sugary ththings, things that are going to demineralize your tooth in your mouth? And how long are they staying there for? So when I was a child, it was very much don't eat all those sweets all at once. Whereas, dental professionals now are like, get them over and done with, eat it all at once, end of go. Once it's done, then your saliva comes along, starts to heal and starts to remineralize. And your saliva flow, the quantity, the quality. So what are the calcium phosphate ions like? Is there fluoride in there? Do you use fluoride regularly? What is its buffering potential? And there's no doubt, I mean, at different people, saliva has different buffering potential. So, that's going to affect it as well. The things that you are eating, how easily are they cleared from your mouth? So, think about eating an apple, which will clear, a piece of fruit will clear quite quickly from your mouth, versus something like a sticky bar of some form. Mars bars one springs to mind, but other chocolate sticky bars are available. How long does that hang around versus plain piece of chocolate that clears relatively quickly? So they say, think about those things that are lying around your teeth. Say about your saliva flow. We never give it enough credit. If you have something that's sweet, is it feasible to rinse your mouth with water afterwards? Or put a smear of toothpaste on? So what are the little things that you could do to modify and actually help boost your remineralization and reduce these acid and sugar attacks? Let me see if this is going to move on. Oh, have I got a frozen screen? So that's a QR code that will take you to the page on tooth decay on the website, and you can have a wee look and see. So you will see, perfect teeth versus, cavities both in underneath there. And then what happens if it starts in between, it can eat away in underneath, and then the whole wall just basically is all undermined, the whole thing collapses, which is how all of a sudden you can go from tooth looks fine to a whopping great cavity. Is because the enamel underneath, the enamel covering the dentine underneath, which is much softer, basically has no support because the dentine is decayed away, and then basically the whole thing collapses there. Likewise, root decay, perfect healthy root, versus this where, it's difficult to clean. It's very difficult to restore some of these teeth, and it's quite rapid. So again, it's one of those things, people have medications, people have medical conditions and treatment, cancer treatments, for instance, where root decay and tooth decay can be really quite rampant. So again, it's thinking about what's the environment in your mouth, because it's not easy. If it were easy, we'd be doing that, we'd all be decay free. The difficulty is it's not easy. Neither is it new. We have known about pretty much the basic causes of tooth decay for 100 years or more. And this leaflet here I was given by a friend of mine who had found it when she was caring out her mother's home. And this is the General Dental Council around 1912. The information is not that different to what we would be advising now. So our messages haven't changed. The information we have, yeah, but we've got much more awareness, and our knowledge definitely has increased, and our scientific evidence has expanded dramatically. But the basics of actually cleaning your teeth and eating a healthy diet and not eating a lot of sugars haven't really changed. What has changed is our lifestyles, our behaviors, our inclination to do something different. And I think too, maybe people are going to stop and think now that there is not great access to NHS dentistry. And that means if they need treatment, they're going to have to pay for it, and in some cases pay a lot for it. So is that going to maybe be a motivational factor to actually modifying our behavior that actually is going to help? it's a combination of what you do at home and what your dental team does. And that is one of the reasons why it's so, so important to see your dental team regularly, because they're going to pick up those early signs. And if you haven't had a look at it before, if you just search lift the lip and actually look at the teeth, dry them, look at your teeth and see, are there any signs of demineralization, particularly on kids' teeth? Because that's where it can be difficult to clean, is up and around the gum margin there, biting surfaces. So if it's early, it can be dealt with and healed, for want of a better way of description of it. But it is important that your dental team get to assess your mouth, get to monitor your mouth, get to review your mouth. So really important. But alongside what your dental team are doing, they might suggest putting fluoride varnish on your teeth regularly. And there's lots of really good fluoride varnish programs going on right across the UK. We have now specially trained dental nurses who are going down and doing these in schools. And, it is really making a difference as part of oral health programs. It's not one thing, it's a whole multitude of things that are doing. It's keeping those plates all spinning to improve your oral health and your family's oral health. What can you do at home? Well, something, you can strengthen the tooth surface. One way you can do that is, use fluoride toothpaste and make sure you spit the toothpaste out. Don't rinse out afterwards. Get the maximum benefit out of that. If your risk is increased, you might want to use a fluoride toothpaste that stays around your teeth much longer than the average. So one of the Biomins, for instance, which has bioactive glass that actually retains and helps fluoride slow release over 8 to 12 hours. And that's been a big change in the last sort of 10, 15 years. Can you do something about your saliva flow? Is your mouth dry? So if you suffer from xerostoma or dry mouth, what are you doing about it? Treat and manage the dry mouth because it is increasing your risk of developing tooth decay. And the obvious thing is, are you hydrated? Are you drinking enough water? Oh, keep an eye on the color of your pee. If your pee, your wee, your urine is dark, you are dehydrated. So, one of the first things you can do to help increase your saliva flow is actually ensure that your hydration levels are good. There are plenty of products, xylitol products, special toothpaste, moisturizing gels that will help. And that not only helps to improve the healthy oral environment, pH, the plaque and all the rest of it, but it also helps to lubricate. So that can make it easier for you to clear foodstuffs away from your mouth, so your ability to go and get things away, because when your mouth's dry like that, your mouth can be so painful. It can get your soft tissues can be very easily traumatized, and also you don't want to touch it. So as I say, managing a dry mouth situation is really, really important. You may want to look at using some form of remineralizing product. So that can go from a fluoride mouth rinse at a different time of the day to when you brush your teeth, because that way you're keeping a nice healthy fluoride environment as much of the day as possible. Taking that you brushed last thing at night and in the morning. It might be using a remineralizing product like tooth mousse or MI plus paste, which is, it's like a moisturizer for your teeth. So you brush your teeth, you clean your teeth, and then you moisturize them with calcium phosphate and fluoride. And again, I was talking about MI paste plus the other week, and if we wanted to build the strongest, healthiest, most resistant tooth surface, we would do it in the ratio that you find calcium phosphate and fluoride in MI paste plus. So great product, a huge fan of it. And as I say, topical fluoride from your dental team, really useful. So bottom line, eat well, clean well, be well. What one thing might you think about changing? Is there one thing that you want to change? Can you change? What control do you have? Do you have the ability to eat a healthy diet? Reduce the amount of sugars that you have, not have that biscuit with your cup of tea in the morning, not have the sugar in the coffee. Look at having a filter coffee if you're out, instead of a cappuccino or a latte, because they are absolutely laden with sugar. Are there alternatives? And if you're buying coffee when you're out, are you sipping it over a long period of time? So are you in a train for 2 hours and you're just sipping this latte constantly, because all you're doing is extending that acid attack? What about eating healthy fruit and veg? Because, people talk about their sugars in sugars in fruit. Sugars in fruit are not considered free sugars because they are part of a whole fruit, and there's so much water in there that they're not considered to cause tooth decay. So what you want to do is, have a healthy choice. Instead, if you have to eat something, have an apple, have an orange, have a piece of fruit, fresh fruit, instead of actually going for that cereal bar or something like that, which is A, sticky, and B, is full of sugar and it's going to be hanging around your teeth. Think about chewing sugar-free gum after you've eaten, because that stimulates the saliva flow. Sugar-free gum with xylitol. Xylitol is really clever because it stops the bacteria that cause decay sticking to your teeth. So again, it's creating that really nice, healthy environment in your mouth. So, that is one way you can do. So you want to keep sugar in, sugary, meal times only, and avoid them before bed. Get into the habit of reading food labels. Know what you're putting in your mouth. It amazes me how people will complain about, you're not going to put that in my body, and yet they don't read ingredient labels and food stuff, and they don't know what else they're already putting in their body. So, become aware, raise your awareness, increase your knowledge of what you're eating, as well as when you're eating it. And that is really important. So try it, is stopping eating or drinking that hour before bedtime something that you might want to think about? I could do that. Can you do that for a week? Can you do it for 2 weeks? Can you do it for a month? How long does it take to form a habit? Well, we've talked about this before. So it's setting yourself small goals. Right? I'm not going to eat after 7 o'clock in the evening. I'm only going to drink water. Is that something you could do? Or 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock? Giving yourself an hour before bedtime. Is that something that you might be able to do? Say sugar-free doesn't necessarily mean it's safe for teeth, because it might be quite acidic. So as I say, it is a minefield, and it's one of the reasons why I sort of tend to keep it really simple and say, eat at meal times only, and then, bar milk, plain milk or water, stick to everything else at meal times. Because if you eat at meal times only, even if you have sugar there, that's 3 sugar attacks a day, and they're well enough spaced out that your saliva has chime and the ability to remineralize and harden the tooth surface again. If you have 4 sugary attacks a day, including meal times, and you've got good saliva flow and reasonably good plaque control, so your oral hygiene is good, you should be fine. If between 4 and 6 sugary attacks a day, including meal times, good saliva for plaque control, you might be okay. Over 6 sugary attacks a day with good saliva flow and reasonable plaque control, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to end up developing a cavity. So I say, it's stuff we've known for years, but yet our ability to change our behavior is so hard. And I know that as well as everybody. It is not easy to change our behavior. It's just life. So for want of a better way of describing it, life is not always easy, and we do what we can do as and when we can. So, what about cleaning? Could you improve your oral hygiene? Is that something you would be prepared to do? Do you clean in between your teeth every day? I often find people don't clean in between their teeth every day because they haven't found the right tool for them. They haven't found the right bit of kit that they like to use and are willing to use on a regular basis. There is something for everyone. Between brushes, little plastic picks, water flossers, there is something that will work for you that you're comfortable using. And I always work with the principle that something is better than nothing. Then you can evolve to the gold standard. But let's get it into part of your daily routine. Can you do it while you're waiting for the kids to come out of school? Can you do it while at lunchtime? Don't leave it until last thing at night when you're tired, because you want to brush your teeth thoroughly then. Yes, okay, ideally you want to clean in between first, then brushing your teeth. So the last thing that's left on your teeth at bedtime is toothpaste, fluoride toothpaste. But that might not be practical for you. How can you make that work for you? Can you clean in between in the shower? You know, when you wash your hair, when you put conditioner on, could you be doing it then? You know, how can you fit it into your daily life? Because if you can make it fit into your routine and you're using something you like and you're finding it easy enough to use, you're much more likely to do it. So, you know, cleaning well is really, really important. But for most of us, we don't do all of these things perfectly. So therefore, it's useful to do all of them better than we were, and that will help in itself. And keeping well, you know, a healthy body supports a healthy mouth and a healthy microbiome. I talked about the oral gut microbiome thing a few weeks ago, and we know there's connections. We know your mouth is a huge reflection of your overall health and well-being. You know, when I talk about mental and physical health being reflected in your mouth, people sort of look at me. But if even you think about when you're stressed or anxious, how your mouth gets dry, you can see how that then actually is connected to your overall health. We know that treatment for a lot of particularly chronic conditions can impact your oral health through cancer treatments, treatment for diabetes, heart disease. All those things can have, many of those medications can have a side effect of a dry mouth, and your mouth is dry, your risk is increased, not only of tooth decay, but also gum inflammation, gum disease, because the plaque bacteria, the bacteria in your mouth will multiply more rapidly. The plaque biofilm gets thicker, faster, and more tenacious, more difficult to remove. So, you know, what you want to do is manage any symptoms of your health that's going to impact your oral health. And if you're not sure where those connections are, please contact us. Take time out for teeth. Come and talk to us. Come and talk to me about it, because we're here to help. You know, we know oral and general health are linked. I've talked about that. You know, think of your mouth as the front door to your body. What goes in there, what goes on in there has an impact everywhere else. So it is worth stopping and thinking about. And, you know, even if it is just upping your water intake. Again, I've said this so many times, don't go looking for a 2 litre bottle of water and think, I have to drink this all day. You know, get a small glass, set it beside the tap. Every time you go past, have that. And I mean, literally almost like an egg cup. You know, a tiny glass of water every time you go past that. You do not go past the tap without filling it and drinking it. And it's a great way of gradually increasing your water, and doing it over a gradual period of time will also stop you running to the bathroom. And if you've been a huge coffee drinker, which is a diuretic, drinking water, you may well find you're not running to the loo actually nearly as much. So, you know, the little things are what can make a difference. But think about, you know, cut cavities. It's what we're trying to do. We want to cut out cavities, which is a bit of an oxymoron on that one, because dental professionals will talk about cutting cavities. So preparing the tooth for a filling, they talk about cutting a cavity, preparing the shape to actually fill the tooth. But it all starts, you reducing your risk of tooth decay starts with the first step of eating well, cleaning well, and being well. Now I'm going to stop this sharing malarkey and bring you back to me. And so I said, it is about, you know, managing that plaque film, managing your sugar intake, which is far easier said than done. Excuse me. I always say, you know, knowledge is power. Knowing what you're eating and when you're eating, it's easy because you can see how frequently you are eating or drinking. Try and drink only water, plain milk, plain tea, coffee, and it's awful that we now have to say plain tea and plain coffee these days, because so often you think, oh, coffee's fine, but actually, if you're making coffee out of a machine or you're buying coffee from a coffee shop, the chances are it is full of sugar. So, you know, if you've got an option, stick to the plain stuff, plain coffee with milk in it, and plain tea with milk in it, but there's lots of other fancy stuff out there. You know, who knew that there were so many options? You know, coffee was coffee, tea was tea, but there's now so many options there. So have a think. Often in coffee shops now you will see there is on a menu about what the calorie intake is. A calorie intake is your calorie label is quite useful because the calories from things like that largely come from the sugar that's added to it. And again, you know, just look for sugar and coffee, search that on our Facebook page, and you will see that I've talked about that in the past, and you'll get an idea of just how much sugar is in these things. But let me just switch cameras a wee second and see if I can have a closer look at this model. One of the reasons why I went back to Zoom. So, you know, what we're talking about here is tooth. Nice tooth. And with this tooth, you can see, let me get a pointy thing, a little mark on the biting surface here. And that can be a little area of demineralization. I see these crinkly bits. That's where plaque bacteria likes to stick, and it's also where food likes to stick. So think about cornflakes, crisps, and how they stick in your back teeth, and you're using your tongue to try and dig them out. That's why it's so important to get these crinkly bits. And the problem is, even your toothbrush bristles, you know, struggle to get right down in there. But if you leave that, and it's not just there, if I move that, you can see how it's also starting in between the teeth. And where is it? Let me turn this round this way. You can see that starting in between those teeth. And that's one of the reasons why it's so, so important to clean in between there and actually break that biofilm down. See if I can find decent size interdental brush. So you actually can get that in there and compress it up. It's not big enough. Let me find something that's worthy of the space. What you want to do is make sure that it is compressing into that space. So you can see the bristles compressing in and out there, that they're actually cleaning that space and breaking that down. So let me move these teeth around in order, which was silly of me. So you've got this early signs. Then what happens is, because once that bacteria gets in underneath the enamel on the hardest surface in the body, what happens is it gets into the dentine, which is much softer than the enamel of the tooth. And the dentine, it eats away the dentine much more rapidly. So what you get is this all being undermined. So it's all undercut. So the bacterial plaque is eating away there with the sugar, is having an absolute field day. You can't get in there to clean it. So of course, happy days, it goes undermining all of this. And then you can see why that actually then, same thing happens in between. So you can see how this is getting undermined, they're undercut. And what happens then is the whole thing just collapses in. And you can see how that just, the enamel, which was all covering this. So if you go back to that, it's all solid there. Bacteria's got in there, it started eating all underneath. And what's finally happened is this has actually just collapsed. And you've got this huge cavity. More food gets stuck in there. Can't really clean it out, more bacteria get in there, and basically it's having its own very own private party. And what can happen is that cavity then can get right in to the heart of the tooth, where the nerve and blood vessels contained into the pulp there, and that is where you end up with infection, which once it gets out through there, goes in through the soft tissue, and it will track through the path of least resistance. You can get swellings, and that's where you get the abscesses developing. And sadly, my colleagues who work in children's hospitals tell me that unfortunately it is becoming a much more frequent occurrence for them to be called to the emergency room, the emergency department, to see children who have got draining abscesses externally. So they've got this external swelling on their face, and that is heartbreaking because it's for preventable disease. And often the first protocol is given, particularly with you know, if they've got a temperature and they're ill, is antibiotics. You know, we don't want to be firing antibiotics at children, at anybody, more than we absolutely have to. So trying to control the bacterial plaque, the stuff that gathers around the gum margin, is really, really important. Let me just switch back to these cameras again. So you can see a little bit about how tooth decay evolves and develops, and how all of a sudden you can go from, you know, not particularly big, you know, a bit of staining, you know, how you can go from a small hole to basically mega collapse fairly quickly, if you don't nip it in the bud. And that's why getting to see a dentist is an investment. And I know, ideally everybody would have access to an NHS dentist and they would see them regularly. Unfortunately, we're not in that situation at the minute. So it is about trying to prioritize oral health, and that doesn't necessarily help those that are least able. But is there something about having been able to access good fluoride toothpaste and making sure the toothbrushing is happening every day at home? The toothbrushing programs, yeah, great for, getting kids involved and engaged at schools. But it needs to happen at home. It needs to happen before they go to bed, and needs parents to do it for them. So, there's a much bigger picture here than just, giving kids toothpaste and toothbrushes and getting them to brush in school, particularly tiny kids who really struggle with the dexterity, the ability to do it. So I think there's a lot of things we can do. The use of fluoride is huge. And there are a number of sort of water fluoridation projects sort of evolving across the UK. But the easiest way of getting fluoride around your teeth, so that boosts what your saliva is doing, it helps to remineralize and buffer, then neutralize and buffer and harden the enamel again, is just with fluoride toothpaste. And you don't need to be paying a small fortune for it. You can go in and look at the own brands. Many community dental services, there's very many oral health projects going on, programs going on, where you can get that toothpaste and it's not overly expensive. They'll say it is, it's one of those, prevention is better than cure, but it's also cheaper than the cure. And it's certainly an awful lot more pleasant than the cure. So there you go. That is me for this evening, my little ramble on cavities. My little ramble about what you can do to help yourself. So what one thing can you do, or are you willing to do? Is it sort of upping your water intake, rinsing your mouth every time after you've eaten? Is it, looking that you are using fluoride toothpaste? Is it starting to spit out but not rinse out afterwards? Is it the fact that you can switch from sugar in your tea or coffee to either just plain ordinary instant filter coffee, cut the fancy coffee that you'll probably save yourself a fortune as well, switch to some sort of sweetener, sugar-free sweetener? Is there something there? Because whether you just only a half teaspoonful, it's still going to reduce that plaque pH, and it's still going to cause demineralization. So you're better switching it all together, and look at, are you keeping well? Are you looking after yourself? And doing these small things, these little steps, and getting into the habit of doing them regularly can have huge benefits, not just for your smile and your oral health, but also for your pocket. It can save you a fortune, because we know tooth decay results in restorations, fillings, crowns, bridges, tooth loss, and then replacement of teeth. And people who are losing teeth now want to go down the pathway. They don't necessarily want to look at dentures. Dentures aren't cheap. They're looking at implants, and they are extremely expensive, and they need to be extremely well maintained. So if you're not looking after your mouth before you think about a dental implant, you need to really stop and take stock of yourself before you invest the amount of money you have, because you are about to get the Rolls Royce of teeth, and you need to give it the care and attention it requires. But in the meantime, start cleaning well, be really methodical every night in the morning. Fluoride toothpaste, every surface, all teeth, spit out, don't rinse, let the toothpaste stay around your teeth. Clean in between every day, once a day, before you brush it, or at a different time of the day. Try and keep sugary food and drink to meal times only, and avoid the hour before bedtime. That is critical, that hour before bedtime. Think about a golden hour. Is that the one thing you might be able to do, is stop eating or drinking anything sweet that hour before bedtime? Look at what your saliva flow is doing. Are you giving your saliva the best opportunity to heal and benefit your teeth? So there you go. Until next week. Next week I am on maneuvers. I'm at a conference. I'm working, and I'm not quite sure what we're going to do Talking Teeth Thursday just yet. But I'll probably be kicking around in the background, but I will let you know in due course of time. Until then, look after yourselves, look after each other, and don't forget to brush your teeth before you go to bed tonight. And try stopping eating or drinking an hour before you actually go to bed. Okay. See you then. Take care. Thanks for joining me. Night.